Hey everybody, welcome back to Gun Totin' Minnesota. My name is Andrew, and what you have here before you is a small, very partial comparison, a brief comparison between a few optics. One of my subscribers reached out and said, hey, could you do a quick comparison between a few and just give us some of your takes concerning reticle, concerning design, and a little bit of glass image quality. And I said, yeah, I'll do my best. I may not be an expert, but I can probably give you some functional information and opinions about the DNT The One 7-35 versus the brand new XED from DiscoveryOpt's 6-36 versus the Zeiss 6-36. Now, notably, there is one missing from the table, and that is the Element Optics Theos 6-36. The reason I've decided to take that out is I have looked through the 6-36 Theos many times against these other optics, have compared, and it is far superior in every way other than internal travel. The internal travel is limited a little bit, but I like everything about the Theos, and I think it's superior to the optics on the table here, and it should be. It's a little bit more expensive, even more than the S3 6-36. It is an expensive optic, so I've decided to take that out. It's not even close to the price comparison. Like, that's not what I'm doing here today. What people have asked for is features, reticle, and a little bit of image quality. You know, how much are you giving up when you go down in price? And I think mostly what people are really concerned about is they want to know the 7-35 versus the Discovery 6-36. They're just curious about that. So that's what I'm going to try to get into a conversation about. It will be a little bit of rambling. It'll be a little bit all over. It might be useful, though, if you're on a budget and you're trying to figure out, do I need to save up for a little bit more, or can I do just fine with one of the more affordable options hitting the market under $1,000 right now? Let's start off with the 7-35, the one from DNT. So DNT did send this out. Actually, Tom over there from High Pressure Pneumatics sent it out, and I'm very thankful for it. I like this optic a lot, and one of the best things about it to me is the reticle. So I'm on 25 power on all these optics, and this one is the best out of all the optics on the table right now. I like the reticle. I like the way that it's built. I like the size of the font. I like the style of the font. I like the numerical indicators and their location. I like the center dot size quite a bit more. The wind leads are good. I like that there's a center dot for each mil in the stadia down the center post line. So each one becomes kind of a precise holding dot again. The contrast is really good. Color is pretty decent. And the eye box is comfortable enough up to that 26, 27 power. I'm pretty comfortable with it. When I've put it on rifles and I've been shooting long range, the closer I get to 30 to 35 power, yep, it's a little more touchy. It is a little darker. It's not quite as comfortable to get behind, but that doesn't matter usually because I'm in the prone and I'm shooting at targets. If I was hunting, that would be a problem, but I'm not going to hunt with this. Not usually, although I did, now that I think of it, I did take it deer hunting. It was on my 308 this last year, and that was kind of it just happenstance. I didn't actually plan that. Yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of the 7-35. The footprint on this is not bad. It's pretty reasonable. The weight, yeah, it's pretty heavy. And that's what I expect. And if I'm going with a really heavy or a large size footprint optic, I don't mind. That's not a problem for me. On 7 power, the image is decent, but I do see I got a lot of black ring going on here. It's a little bit of tunneling. Let me just move this back and forth. Yeah, there's a little bit of tunneling going on. When I go back and forth on that magnification, I can tell I see a little bit more of the inside, the interior of the scope. I'm trying to use layman's terms because I think that's what most people understand the best. So I see a little bit too much of the internals of the scope. Just that black ring around there. My field of view is not as wide or broad as it probably could be. So I'm more of a fan when I don't have much of a bezel on the scope. I like that I have 16 mils of holdover, and it's not the best on the table for holdover. There are scopes with more. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But even on 7 power, I can use the reticle. That's really important, that when you have that low-end power, that the image is not so crap that you can't use it, that the eye box doesn't get weird. I'm a big fan of this optic. Depth of field was also reasonable, but the image on low end and then up to closer to the higher end is pretty usable all the way through, and the reticle is usable all the way through. Now let me move up. The focus ring on this, just slightly stiffer than the other ones. Just slightly. Not a lot, just a little bit. Let's just go all the way up to 35. And on 35 power, let me touch this up. Things look just a little bit more flat than they're going to with the Zeiss. Colors-wise, looks a little bit more flat. I think there might be a little bit of a hue difference, and there should be. There's coating differences. The glass is not the same, but the hue just looks different. I want to say that this looks, maybe it looks warmer and this looks cooler. That's maybe what I want to say, is it looks a little warmer to the eye. So if you like that image, I think that's what you're going to see here. On 35 power, I can still use 5 mils of holdover and 5 mils of windage. It's a great scope. I highly recommend the DNT. I think it's awesome. When it comes to features-wise, the parallax is sufficient. It goes down to, let me turn this around. It goes down to 25. The zero stop method is acceptable. It's not my favorite out of any of them. The tracking has been good, reliable, comes back to 0, stops on 0. That's fine. I like the windage. They moved the windage up, which is just like the S3. The windage has a chevron marker that's higher up, so you don't have to be flat with the scope on your rifle to see that 0 marker. You could actually have your heads up a little bit, or even from your cheek rest, you can look up and the rings won't get in the way. And that chevron line indicator, witness indicator, tells you where you're at. So if you like to dial windage, or you're in a really windy match, it's easy to just reach up and dial that back and forth. Illumination is acceptable on this, but not amazing. It's just acceptable. And that's what I have to say about the DNT. It's a pretty good deal. It's a pretty good scope, and I get behind it. That's why I still have one. Let's move on to the XED. Or actually, no, let's go to the Zeiss. Let's go to the Zeiss for a second. And I'm on 25 power again. On 25 power, there it is. On 25 power, like I said, it feels a little cooler in the image than the DNT. The reticle is still somewhat fine. The center dot is fine. On this scope in particular, it's fairly fine. The rest of the reticle is good. I like these little crosses that it has going on for windage markers, because you have small crosses and big crosses in the reticle. You can look it up if you want to look up. I think it's the ZFI reticle, something like that. Whatever their mil reticle is for all these. And I like that hold marker. I've used that in competitions quite a bit. In fact, the last centerfire match where I used this optic, it was this one. And I used that reticle. I did use holds a fair amount, and I like the little crosses because they're bold and they contrast well against targets, and it helps me favor a little bit more. I don't get so lost with the little dots. A lot of times in windage dots, if they're pretty small, they just get lost against gray targets. So like playing the PRS game or NRL22 game, sometimes things can get lost, or it takes you too long to find it, especially if you're on lower power. And so I think this reticle has some strengths, but boldness and contrast is not as good as the DNT so far. Okay, the other feature of this is the way that the Christmas tree is built. I'm just going to talk about that for a second. Let me back off. If I go all the way down, on 6 power, the reticle is, I'm going to say for most people, it's pretty tiny. It's a touch too small. This really should have been just a 7-35 scope. That's my opinion of this optic altogether. It doesn't do as well with a 6-36 for various reasons, and it has to do with the reticle a little bit as well. Yeah, I'm going to say that reticle is just a bit too small. Field of view is better. It should be, because it's a 6 and not a 7. But I'm seeing a lot less on 6 power right now. I'm seeing a lot less of the edges of the internals of the scope. I don't have quite as much black ring around there. When I go back and forth on magnification, no, I don't have tunneling. Not much. If there's any, it's hard to perceive. Very large magnification ring, nice and smooth, and it should be. It's thousands of dollars more than that DNT is, but it's very, very smooth. I would say the reticle, for my taste, becomes much more usable around 8 power. 8 to 10 is decent, and that's a lot of times where I'm using a 6 to 36. It's pretty decent there. It's great at 16 and 20 for me, which is a little heavy. That's a little bit much in my opinion for competitions, PRS, gaming, that kind of thing. Unless you're static, 16 to 20 power is kind of a lot. If you're shooting a KYL rack, maybe that's one thing. But even then, I just find that's a little bit more magnification than I typically have to have. And so, again, it's going to be up to you, and if you have really great vision and you can contrast on those little tiny dots. Now, thankfully, when it comes to the stadia and the holdovers and that lateral line, I remember shooting this optic. I think I was shooting this at some extreme distance last year. And because of the thickness of those lines, that's where I got some good contrast. I think I had to hold 8 mils of wind last year, if I remember right. And that's the extreme edge. Yeah, it's extreme edge of that windage line. This one tracks well, seems pretty reliable. I don't love the zero stop on this one either. I don't love these Allens that I have to lift off, and then there's an internal housing, kind of a hub that grabs on. And I've had it slip once, so it's not my favorite. It's not my favorite design. I kind of like the other ones better. The reticle is pretty good. One thing that you can say is if you need to go ELR distances, excuse me, if you need to go ELR distances and you're going down further and further, the reticle on the Zeiss here has these thick, broad lines. They're really thick. They actually cover up a fair amount of the field down there when I'm on 6 power. They do help draw your eye to the center. The illumination is phenomenal on Zeiss optics. One of the best in the industry. It might be the best for magnified optics in the industry. I wouldn't know per se, but it's the best that I've ever used, and that is not a question. Really nice illumination, red or green. So if you're using this in a hunting scenario and you can't see that reticle, you bump up a little illumination, and it basically works for close range shooting. This one has a parallax that goes from 10 yards to infinity, so you can actually get much, much closer, which allows for more diversity or adaptability to different platforms and firearms. If you want to do air guns, you want to do 10-yard competition, or you want to shoot really far, this optic will definitely do it, and the reticle can get you there. I can see 32 mils of elevation in just the reticle, and I've used that out before at the very bottom of the glass to make consistent impacts, because this at 530 yards with this rifle, with the ammo that I use, it's 33 mils. So I dial 1 mil, and then I hold the 32 to see what I think. The edges of the glass seem to be pretty decent. There might be like a slight yellow tinge between this optic and this optic on the edges of the glass. When I back it off and I zoom it in, and I'm on a day like today, I do notice a little something there. Just kind of looks like a little yellow tinge, maybe a ring around that, but it's not super distracting, and that's the main thing. If it's distracting, it's garbage, and you don't want that. This isn't distracting. It's just there if you really look for it. That would be my opinion on the very, very edges. I don't get chromatic aberration with this that I notice. It's a pretty comfortable optic, and even when I run it to the ends of range of travel, this particular optic still looks pretty decent. I think it's configured well. Whatever they did to make that image work, even when I dial this one out there, it looks pretty good. The same cannot be said for the 4-25, which I have sitting right over there. The 4-25, when I dial that to the extreme ends of range, obviously it has a lot more internal elevation. It's a more compact optic, but it just doesn't look very good. So I end up only using 80% of the advertised travel in the 4-25 model. The 6-36, I can use most of it for whatever reason. You know, it's limited at 32 mils, and it looks really good. Most of the time, I don't even have a complaint about it. I can tell it gets a little bit fuzzy. Instead of the image, moving this way, it actually loses a little bit on this one. It loses a lot on the 4-25, but anyways. Reticle is good. I can use it. Obviously, it's on this rifle for a reason, so I think it's usable. It's just kind of small on the center dot, and since I dial for most of my shooting, it kind of bothers me a little. It does have that windage, which is offset, so you can see the chevron and your witness marker. Clicks are fairly tactile, but not the best on the table. I actually think the DNT is probably the best for feeling and audibility, if that's something you care about. And then the Discovery, and then I'm going to say the Zeiss is after that for feeling. They all return to 0. They all track well. So that's not a deal breaker for me. I'm just saying purely on the tactile feeling, and if you did an audibility test and that matters to you for whatever reason, yeah, the Zeiss probably comes in last for that. They don't have a bunch of backlash, but they roll kind of funny. I like tangent turrets. I like some of the Schmittenbender turrets. I like the Element Theos turrets, and I also like these turrets here more than I like the Zeiss turrets on this particular model. I think it's LOW made these models, and a number of brands use them. I will say, out of all the models of 6 to 36 and 4 to 25 that came out of the same factory with different brands on them, I actually prefer the Zeiss model of them. Between the reticle, between the configuration, and just how things work, the magnification ring, all that, I do think it's really good optic, and I like it more than the other models that came out with different brands on them. Let me push up to 36 power. On 36 power, field of view is still a little better than the DNT. Image, I think, is a little better. It's my opinion. It does seem to be sharper. The contrast is good. It is a little cooler seeming. The color just seems a little cooler, but the contrast is better. Field of view is better. Reticle is not better, but at 36 power, I can see everything really well. Center dots aren't going to be an issue. Wind lead dots aren't going to be an issue. It's going to be very comfortable. Do I shoot it at 36 power often? Almost never. Almost never. I do use it for spotting at 36 power occasionally for people, and the image does get a little darker. You're going to need some decent light, but I think this gets darker on 35 than this gets on 36. I think this has less detail than the Zeiss has. I think the Zeiss clarity, sharpness, just the ability for me to extract detail to my eye, I think this is better, and it doesn't seem to be much of a competition to me. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong. Maybe somebody can do a test, and if you did an acuity test and you found out the opposite, I would love to know, actually. But for me, in my eye, I just think the Zeiss looks a lot better. Oh, it's really, really windy out today. It's ruined all my group shooting. And I meant to do a lot more video work today, but the wind isn't consistent. If it's consistent and windy, I can deal with it. But it's changing directions every few minutes. It's going somewhere new. It's just whipping around. That's my excuse anyways. It's sunny. At least there's sun. It's Minnesota, so that's kind of a big deal. You don't get enough sun. I'm going to throw on now the biggest optic. This one is the biggest footprint. It's the heaviest. This is a 35 millimeter tube versus the 34 millimeter tubes I've been talking about so far. Okay. Just need to adjust this to a similar aiming point I was using. Okay. So the 6 to 36, again, I'm starting on 25 power. The center dot is a little bit fine. It's a little bit smaller than the DNT. It's very similar to the Zeiss. It feels somewhat similar. I heard one person say it feels similar to the Z-Comp reticles. I'll just let that statement go as it is, but it depends what reticle you're talking about too, by the way. There's a little room to breathe around that center dot. I kind of like that. I do want to say I like the way that the center first mill is set up in the quadrant. So your first mill up, down, left, and right. I like the way it's set up. I feel like it's really easy and fast to read that and make corrections. If you miss or you're spotting for someone, I feel like it just is so natural to look at that and quickly pick up what the corrections ought to be. You do have to be on enough magnification to see it well, in my opinion. I think it's a little bit small, but that's just an opinion I have. I tend to be on the big dot size team. Most people aren't there. I know most people like a little bit smaller dots, it seems like. And when you're talking about a 636, you could be using it for long-range target practice, long-range hunting, maybe PRS as well. Eye relief on 25 is acceptable. The image, kind of the same thing as the Zeiss. So I'm looking at it right now. It feels a little cooler than the DNT. I'm not sure I could prove that, but it does feel a little cooler than the DNT does. It feels a little more similar to the Zeiss. And I don't think it's sunlight, because the sunlight has been very consistent. There's no clouds out. And I'm filming this all about the same time, looking at the same target with the same reference points. Field of view is not terrible. It's not as good as the Zeiss. I think it's got to be really close to the DNT. Yeah, honestly, I think that must be really close. I have a few reference markers down there. It must be very close. And I have a feeling that the DNT and the Discovery are going to be too close to really call, which one is superior in features or glass. I have a very strong feeling it's going to be hard to tell the difference. Perhaps different coatings and some different configurations internally. Let's move it down to 6 power. The magnification ring moves smoother than the DNT, and it's probably in between. I think the Zeiss moves the smoothest and is the most appropriate for comfort and function. It's not a bad resistance, but it's not sloppy. The DNT is a little bit firm, and this one is somewhere in between, so it's pretty good. Now the DNT, if I was on the lowest power of the DNT, I would see a lot more of the bezel or the edge or the internals of the scope, and it would be a little bit more distracting. On this one, not so much. It's not as bad as that DNT. It's not as good as the Zeiss. It's somewhere in between. The reticle on 6 power, this is my opinion, even with illumination, I can't use it. I can use it for field of view. I can use it maybe for like close distance spotting, observation of deer at close ranges, a few hundred yards. But I just can't make out enough of that reticle to do a lot with it. It does have bold horizontal and a vertical line coming up with a little chevron that come together. I can see those, but the actual stadia are just very, very small. It's at about 8 power, if I remember right. Yeah, at 8 power, I can start to read a little better. I can see the center line, vertical and horizontal. Not so much the wind leads, but a couple numbers. And then when I'm up to 10 power, let's go to 12 actually. On 12 power, then it's really comfortable. It's easy to see. This particular text and font size is good. It seems to be like kind of like the stretched taller type. So if you use that style font and typing, it might kind of jive with your eye. Just seems like a bit of a stretched font. The lines do contrast better than the wind leads do. The wind leads in the Discovery 636 are dot style, and so there's not going to be as much of the target or the field of view that's obstructed because it's very open, it's airy, and you're not going to see those dots very much unless you're looking for them, if that makes sense. Let me go back to 6 power for a second. iBox is pretty good. I get a little distortion. Yeah, I can see a little distortion around the very, very edge. There's a little something there. It's kind of a yellow hue, but I don't think the hue is chromatic aberration. I don't exactly know what it is. There's a little something there. It's not super uncommon. I've actually seen this in a lot of scopes, and I see it here too, for what it's worth. Okay, I'm up to 14 power. 14 power is really good. That's money right there. I like 14 power with this. iBox feels comfortable. Reticle feels very comfortable. Field of view is acceptable. If I was running illumination at this point, it would make sense there as well. One important feature of this optic I should comment on is that this is not going to be as versatile when it comes to the air gun capability unless you're shooting big bore air guns. These optics, the Zeiss goes down to 10 yards. The DNT goes down to 25 yards. And the Discovery goes down to 40 yards. And so sometimes sacrifices are made so that you can make a better quality product. And I think in this case, instead of going down to 25 yards, they decided to limit it at 40. And it pushes it closer towards, 50 yards and beyond shooting. So airgun guys might not appreciate that as much unless they're shooting their PCPs a little bit further. One thing you can do, and it works a little bit, is if you go down to minimum parallax setting, and let's say you have a target at 25 yards that you need to engage, if you just back off magnification, the apparent parallax error is a little less. That's just what I've noticed, and one observation I made is that it seems pretty usable. I actually put this on a training rifle, or I was shooting at 25 yards for a whole day, and I was still hitting my targets for the whole day. I just had to back off magnification to about 11, and then it was comfortable enough for me, even though it was a considerable parallax difference. Not a really dirty image, not a super dirty parallax, but not as clean as it can be at 40 yards, obviously. So I do like it there at 14 power. I can still see a lot of the reticle. This one happens to be set up in MOA. I'm not an MOA shooter, but I'll just tell you that you can see 40 MOA with wind holds, and then you do have a little gap. There's a chevron, it's kind of a transparent chevron, and then thick bold lines under that. I think it works. I've shot these reticles with success for a long time. I think it's the PR2 reticle, if I remember right, or something similar to that. Let's go up to 36. All the way up to 36 power. Eyebox is going to get touchy. I don't think I get tunneling with this. A little bit. That's a pretty small amount. If I really look for it, there's a little bit of tunneling. That's not too bad. Remember, this is a budget optic. Now at 36 power, yeah, the eyebox is definitely touchy. It's a more dull image. It's not as bright. It's kind of what you'd expect. I can still see a decent amount of the reticle, but head placement is going to matter a lot. That's just what I'm going to say at budget optics in general. It's more comfortable around 30 power for me. But if you needed to spot, or you were going to shoot some targets and you're in the prone position, you're really comfortable on 36 power, you can probably make that work for you. And I have several times. I shot 308 past 600 yards with this, and I did try out shooting max power, and it wasn't that hard for me to stay in the glass, even with the 308, and watch my rounds run down range. I had decent trace. I could see a little bit of vapor trail going behind my bullets. So I think the image is quality enough where it's not going to distract you. And that's the main thing when it comes to the limitations of optics like the DNT or the Discovery. Yes, they are limited in some ways compared to the Zeiss for image quality, but they still have a lot of features. And I'm going to say the features aren't really limited unless you're talking about illumination, where the Zeiss blows everybody out of the water. I think these are pretty similar with illumination. They're functional for sundown and sunrise. They both have a lot of internal elevation, at least 32 usable mils. And if you get closer to the ends of range, it's not as good of an image, but it's decent. I think both of them have similar or exact same quality glass. That'd be my guess. I don't know about coatings. I think the coatings might be different between the two of them. I think there's some advantages to the Discovery if you like to have an oversized parallax wheel, if that's something you get into. If you like to have a heavier, more robust optic, absolutely the Discovery is heavier. So if you're trying to weight down a PRS rifle or a target rifle of some sort, the Discovery has that going. It has the big oversized turrets with kind of the meat grinder texture on there. And one more feature that I think sets this apart from the DNT and the Zeiss, this has a toolless reset for the zero. And when it comes to setting the zero stop, you only need one Torx and one pin to set it up. So it's very convenient. I think that makes this a little bit superior to the others concerning that one feature. So again, I can't tell you which one is going to be best for you. I think I would have to know so much more about you and what you're trying to do. I can't just tell you which one to go and buy. Here's what I can say. Do I think they're all worth the price that they're asking? No. I don't think so. I do think the DNT is worth it. I think this is a great optic. I'm really happy to see the quality they have. I want to try out their 5 to 25 because I think this is really good and it is worth it. The Discovery is worth it. I'm really happy with the direction that I'm seeing Discovery go. It seems like their optics are getting better and better. Their image quality and their eye box is getting better and better with time. And I'm really happy to see the research and development is paying off for them. So yeah, these are worth it at their price point. And I'm talking about somebody who wants an entry-level optic. I shouldn't say entry-level. They're better. They're better than entry-level. But you're looking for, let's say, a sub $1,000 optic to do a number of things. Target practice, PRS, NRL22, maybe long-distance hunting. I don't know. Yeah, these are definitely worth it. When it comes to this Zeiss, should you just save up all your money and get the Zeiss? If you're not really serious about hunting and shooting and long range and target practice, I don't really see a benefit to getting the Zeiss unless you need the 10-yard parallax, unless you need the incredible illumination that it has. I don't know that there's really a more sophisticated design inside of this optic than what you're seeing here. I think the image is better, but is it worth it for most people? I don't think so. And is it worth the MSRP on this optic? I don't think so. I actually believe there's a little bit too much of an upcharge on this. I said before, I like the Zeiss version of the 636 and the 4 to 25 the most. Out of the other options that are out there right now that are very similar or exact same production, I like the configuration better on the Zeiss. But I think they're asking too much for these optics. And I think we're going to see inflation is going to combat the fact that there's a lot of competition in the market. And hopefully we don't get stagflation. But if we do, this is going to remain a little bit out of reach for some people, and I'm going to recommend going towards more affordable optics. If you just don't, compete all the time, if you're not taking shooting to that next level, I don't see the advantages here of this optic, although I really like it, and it's on my gun for a reason. I think it's a great optic, but at that price point, I can find a lot of optics that will compete with that 6 to 36 or give me more than what the 6 to 36 can give me. And I just very rarely need the full amount of magnification range or the brand. I don't need the brand. I don't mind having the Zeiss. Pride of ownership does matter with your gear, and you maybe are a person who doesn't want to put a $500 optic on a $5,000 rifle. I understand that, but you have to realize that optics are coming closer and closer together, and the image quality is better and better. I'm not saying that this is just as good. I want to make that really clear. I'm not saying the Discovery or the DNT is just as good as the Zeiss. It's not. But you really would have to weigh the advantages of the Zeiss to find out if that little bit of increase is worth it to you for the type of shooting you do. My guess is there's a small amount of people out there where that Zeiss is really worth it. I think I'm in that camp. For me, it was worth it. I like the Zeiss, and I'm going to keep running it. I can trade off some of those things that I don't love about it because what I get out of it is a really nice image, a pretty reliable optic, and great illumination along with 10-yard settings, which sometimes I actually use for parallax. So for me, it makes sense. It's pretty nice. One thing I didn't talk about, probably should have said something about it, the Zeiss has the ability to change the throw lever in 3 different positions, whereas the DNT and the Discovery are fixed. That's one really small feature, but I think it's worth throwing in. There's so much more I could say about these optics. I know I'm blabbing. I've been running on for too long. But basically, that's what somebody asked for. They just want to know what my opinions were of these optics. I like them all. I think they're all good. But if you're kind of on a budget and you need to buy good ammo, I'm going to tell you to get one of these. Get that ammo before it gets expensive instead of spending more on the Zeiss, because I think these will get you really far. These are both tested past 1,000 yards for me. I've done really well. I've shot excellent groups with them. I've shot competitions with both of them now. Actually, all 3 of them now. And as much as I like the Zeiss, I think for your benefit as a viewer, I'm going to push you towards one of these. So that's all I have to say, guys. Thank you for watching my channel. And if you like this video, maybe one of these videos right here would be well suited for you too.